Assignment 1 then for GTC 236 is the block tutorial number 1. We're going to assume aluminum 6061. We're not really concerned, but with the material thickness on our first go around, we're just going to go through the operations, finish out setting up the options that we may need. And so we're going to assume that we either have some really strong double-sided sticky tape or a really great vacuum chuck to hold this down. And we're not so concerned with thickness at this point. But one of the things that as we go forward, we're going to talk about material condition. How much oversize? What is my stock selection? How am I going to hold on to it? What are the conditions that we're machining around? All right, so that's going to become more of a bigger deal than it is right now. So basic dimensions, 3" by 3" is a good place to start. We'll pull the hole locations. I have this duplicated on my other screen, and since I did not launch, I guess I get to launch. I knew there was something I was forgetting. So we'll come back while it's doing that. It shows the datum target in the lower left. You're welcome to draw from the lower left and go into quadrant 1, positive directions. Pretty much whatever orientation makes sense to you. And there's going to be things that play out, and then there are a lot of self-correcting behaviors that you ran it, you liked it, you would do it again. Or not so much. I think to do it over, I probably would have oriented a little bit different, or picked made a different selection. So with the transform, we can always rotate. We can always move this around and make those adjustments. And as long as the toolpath chains are following and the geometry does not get completely lost, the toolpaths will follow and update. All right, so we were in the black screen. I tried the white. And again, my screen's going to be a little scrunched to fit on the projector and do the recording. So I'm not working with as much space as I'd like to. But going back into the configuration, the 3 items that we wanted to work with, if I go with the background gradient color, I'm going to set it to white. And then we're going to come down to the geometry color. It can set to black. And the grid color will be at gray.
What was the foreground color?
The geometry color. So right above it, geometry color and grid color are 2. Now as we go through, if I find that I'm having problems with selections or can't see something, then I'm going to have to revisit this. But the initial experiments are pretty good.
What was the grid color?
So the grid color, I just picked the kind of the middle gray. So it'd be some contrast. And again, if there's colors that you prefer, experiment, try them out, and we'll see how it works. All right, so I don't want to leave this screen. I do want to see the preview, and that's certainly a lot brighter. The problem is going to be that my grid points aren't really as dark as maybe we would like them. So where else was it? Then going down to screen, and then under screen, grid settings. We had the size, the spacing is at 1 inch. So that's going to be a pretty wide spacing. Let's jump back over here. So if I was going to use the grid to snap to, we have some 0.5s. So that being the case, I would need to be at least at 1/2 inch, maybe 1/4 inch to snap to those grid points. So let's go 0.25 and 0.25, and that should tighten up the grid. Don't really need to change or shift the origin, so it's going to stay at 0, 0. Snap is set to always. 25 is the full square, so 12.5 by 12.5 in quadrant 1, 12.5 by 12.5 quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. So it's basically dividing that in half. And I don't remember, I haven't ever shifted the origin to see if it shifts that scale or that position. So I've always just worked in the 4 quadrants like normal. So let's see, let's go ahead and
So
accept.
the size makes it 25 inches by 25 inches.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll see that here in a second when we zoom out. So I guess the grays, it's not great, but the dots are showing up as we get a little closer in. And as I zoom out, there is 25 by 25 on my square. So as a beginning, we're going to start off with this. If I don't like it, then I'm going to continue to make little tweaks as we go. The other thing, excuse me, the other thing that we added was on the quick access. Yeah. No, was the ribbon? Nope. Context menu. And get to it eventually. So on the context menu, we had analyze entity properties, which is going to be useful. And then let's see if I can find it again. Not graphics. What I'm looking for is the clear colors. So screen. All right. So under screen, then you can go to clear colors, and we're going to add it. It adds it at the very bottom, but I would really like for it to be closer to the top, like at the top. So I'm just left click holding down and dragging it to position. So when I hit the right mouse button, those are going to be my two very top choices. Analyze distance, probably not so much. The entity properties are the one that I use the most. If I decide that I'm using the distance, I can always come back and move it again. And then is there, oh, okay, and then snap to grid should be a toggle. And do I see it over here? No, I'm going to go ahead and add it. And, oh, well, it went to where what was selected, so I didn't know it would do that. So if you have something selected, it put my snap to grid right before the clear colors. And we'll hit OK. So what that does is now when I right click, we're getting some basic properties, clear colors, analyze, and snap. All right, so I'm not sure if my snap is on, but we're about to find out. All right, so going back to the geometry then, 3 inches by 3 inches, and we're going to draw in quadrant 1 so that our dimensions are positive, positive. All right, so from the wireframe, I can either go line to endpoints or rectangle. Well, for the first pass through, I kind of want to do the line to endpoints, but then there's also the efficiency part of it is let's go right to rectangle. All right, so position for first corner is to snap at the origin. And so it's showing me the intersection of the X and Y. And then the width, 3 inches, and height of 3 inches. Okay, so that gives me a basic size that I'm going to work with. And we go ahead and hit OK. And since I set my object to be in black, then it's going to, basically overrun the gray just enough to go visual. All right, so I am not snapping to the grid, and I'm not used to the upper display here, so I'm going to just kind of scan through. And went to, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and say snap to grid. And then each of those 1/4 inch points I'm going to be able to select to. And at the very bottom across the status bar at the bottom of the screen, it's going to give you those locations. I'm probably more used to doing an offset. So we'll do one as the grid snap and then one as an offset. The disadvantage of the grid is that if I am at 3 inches in one direction and I'm at say a 3 and a 32nd, 3.032.125, and then I'm not telling it to snap to 30 seconds, I'm not going to be able to pick up that coordinate. So where it's convenient to use the grid, do so. If it's something that's going to fall in between your grid settings, then we're going to have to put in those values and be able to manipulate the numbers. So right now I'm at 0.75, and I'll click at 1 inch. and then come down to the X origin, click at 1 inch. When I go ahead and accept, it turns into an object line, and if it was part of the selection, that would be where I'd go to pick the clear colors. So my preference, and this is one where I looked and I said, you know, the wireframe and the transform, I'm not really used to jumping back and forth like that. So there was a place, and this is one more customized, and hopefully this will be the last one. Command's not in the ribbon. Oh, customize the ribbon. All right, so if you look at the way this is laid out, we have the wireframe and then we have the transform. If I highlight the transform and do the up arrows, it's going to move through the list. So now I have wireframe and transform next to each other. I could put them at the beginning, I could put them at the end, but I really am going to be using, since we're not generating surfaces for this class, we might generate a solid. You know, so that being the case, if I have screenish, you know, so I have valuable real estate, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck for the surfaces and turn off that ribbon command altogether. So you can manipulate on the customized ribbon, you can manipulate what's showing up on this bar across the top and the menus that are going to be underneath it. So when I hit OK, surfaces is gone, transform is next to wireframe. And it's a little thing, but it's still the, am I going back and forth across the screen? Am I searching? I want to get this where it's comfortable and be able to find it. All right, so under transform, we have the option to translate, and I'm not seeing my offset. Oh, there it is, entity offset. So offset entity, and so one time, and we're going to copy. It's going to offset at 1 inch, and so when I select my geometry, the prompt is saying indicate the offset direction, and then I have red is the selection, magenta is the result. Okay, and then we go ahead and hit OK or apply, and then I'm left with the colors. So this is where the clear colors is going to come in and put everything back to an object. All right, so as you go through the selection, it's giving you the visual feedback of you selected this, you did this, you know, kind of the whatever. But at the end, I want everything to return back to my selected the black object lines. Okay, questions? Yes.
How did you pull up the customized ribbon?
Okay, so just kind of to the custom ribbon comes in, right-clicking up in the area of the, and then customize the ribbon. Takes you to, and if it was quick access, we just come down to, and then you're in this list. Yes.
And how do you move transform closer?
Okay, and so the moving the items was to highlight the item, and then the arrows to the side.
All right.
So those are pretty important little arrows when we start moving things around. Okay, is everybody kind of at that point?
You lost me 10 minutes of that.
Okay.
You just, you know.
So what I'm going to recommend is that if you can follow along. Otherwise, you know, watch as we go through the process, and then we'll come back in lab, and I'll work with you and make sure that you get it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The problem is that, you know, again, as we're going through and clicking, is this going to be an hour, you know, an hour and a half lecture, or, you know, a 30-minute lecture that we can get through and then have more time for lab. So I'm not really designing this to be a follow along, and you know, with the videos in place, I don't want to rely on those fully, but you know, we can always go back and use those as the fallback, because we still have to get through the programming on this, and you know, the options, and going through what we did with the configuration and setting up the options. That's all going to take a little bit of time. Get it the way that you want it, where you're comfortable with it, and then we can focus more on the drawing and the programming. All right, so block with what do we have? 6 lines, and then the circles. Last week I struggled with the circles. So the circle center point, and these are 375. So I'm going to go to the diameter, 375, and enter. And then the prompt comes up and says, enter the center point. Well, it's asking for a center point. So our first is 0.5 and 0.75 in Y. So let me jump back over here real quick. So ½ an inch over and 0.75 up, and then it works out to be, here I go doing math again, 0.75 and 0.75. So just kind of verifying the spacing. So to enter the point, just start typing. 0.5. Oh, maybe. Make sure I'm in the work area. 0.5, 0.75. The little box pops up, and that's the first location. Shows up in the light blue.
You separated them with commas?
Yes, it is a
comma.
A comma, yeah. And we're not concerned with Z in this point, but I'm assuming that if I put in another comment and said I wanted this 1 inch above or 1 inch below my construction plane, that Z value would send it below. We don't need to do that right now because we're just in the 2D, not in a 3D wireframe or anything else going on. So we can go through the next one, 0.5, 1.5, and pick up my previous value, 0.375, and let's see, OK and create. So first one is staying in the operation, is staying in creating the circles, and we still are picking diameters in between. So make sure I'm in the work area, and 0.5 comma 2.25. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and accept. All right, so I could continue entering those values, but we can also go into our transform and see if there isn't a mirror. And under transform and mirror, select entities to mirror is going to be the circles and the checkbox. Oh, got away from it, in selection, and then we're going to pick midpoint and midpoint, and I told it to do something wrong. Oh, I need the select line, select 2 points. So I just made a mirror to the bottom, so that was what not to do. So first point to mirror, second point to mirror. Now I see the correct preview, and we'll go ahead and OK it. All right, so again, I'm in red, the selection, magenta for the result. When I'm done, clear the colors. And since it updated, it also got rid of my mistake. All right, so I said that this isn't really the orientation. That may be the datum that I drew this off of, but that really isn't the orientation that I want to program in. So we're going to keep this program fairly simple, basically concentrating on the chains and getting our steps in. So the majority of this is going to be contour and drill. There's pockets, there's other things that we could do to maybe make this a little more efficient, but we're just going to go through the initial steps and get a program written and worry about making efficient after we kind of get used to the software and what's going on. All right, so I want to have my work stop. So 0, 0 is in this corner, and I would prefer to have the x-axis here be the fixed jaw of my vise. And then my work stop would be on the left side so that the part banks in. I'm not so concerned about orientation that I can't just rotate. So window pick, click, click. So clicking at the start, dragging the box around, clicking again to select everything. In selection. And then, oh, that's new. We can rotate, but yeah, probably not. -90. And when I tab, it shows me the preview. So again, the red is the selection. The magenta is the result. And if I'm okay with that, we go ahead and accept. And I told it to copy. Darn it. So Control Z one more time and window pick. So pick the first point, pick the second point, rotate, make sure that I am moving the rotate, not copying the rotate. And then 0, 90, 180, 270, or going in the reverse, -90. And OK. All right, and then I'm just kind of using the middle mouse wheel to reposition. Not fond of the magenta, so clear colors. And I'm sure there's a better way to do that. I haven't looked through the sidebar here yet, so something that I have to go through and analyze. All right, so that puts my 0, 0 in the upper left corner. And I'm not concerned so much of going back and forth, front to back. You know, the direction I get to choose. You know, and then if the operator setup reports back that, hey, you made a bad choice, or we would prefer it be in this orientation for whatever reason, we can always rotate it and move it again. You know, nothing here is set in stone that it has to be this way. All right, to get into a machine, we've created the part. And the other side of it would be that we imported a DWG. We imported something to generate this geometry, and we got it to our origin. However we got this geometry on the screen, now we have to tell it what machine we're going to run. The toolpaths don't know anything until it knows how we're going to proceed. So jumping over to the Machine tab, and then to Mill, the default is standard Finnock controller. That's going to be fine, but we're going to transfer over to the Haas 3-axis pretty quick. All right, so when we set up tool crib and we set up the default machine next week, we'll have it go into those or have those show up into the selection. As soon as you tell it it's the default mill, you're now into operations. And then, nope, nothing really changed there. So I'm kind of used to having my operations kind of tucked next to the 2D toolpaths, tucked in next to the operations group, but I will learn to adjust for the contour. All right, so we're going to set up tools as we go. I'm thinking 1/2-inch end mill and 3/8-inch drill. So we keep the tools simple because we have a lot more discussion on tools to get into. So facing operation, since this is going to be the step, or if we were running it the other way, you know, top level, bottom level, or top level, bottom level, doesn't really matter at this point. It's what you're visualizing. I'm visualizing this to be the top level. When the operator opens the doors, he or she's looking down at the steps and can see where and be able to measure directly to those items. On the machine group, that is defining that this is the mill. And then this is pretty much standard. I haven't seen any changes so far, but we can right click and see a bunch, or we can just double click. Nope, sorry, double click on the files. And the files are going to take us into all of the default settings, mill default, the control, the tool libraries, operations, defaults, and what we want to show up in the header. So files, not so much that we have to change or do anything with. It's just, in my opinion, you should look at every screen, even if it's just a glance. Just take a peek, see if there's anything in there that you overlooked, that you missed, jogs a memory that you should have done something. The tool settings, we're going to be at program number 1. Feed calculation can be from the tool. We're going to set those as needed. We're going to assign tool numbers sequentially. Coming out of the library, we may pick a 1/2-inch tool that is tool number 260. Tool number 260 is not number 1 that I want in my carousel or in my side mount tool changer. And then if I generate duplicate tool numbers, I also want it to warn of duplicate tool numbers. So I have to go back and find where to set these as the default. It's part of the control, and we've got to dig a little bit to get into those, but we can set these as defaults. Sequence numbers, if I'm going to put sequence numbers, I want them to go by ones and or fives, not hundreds or start at 100 and go by whatever. And then for material, if you want to include the material, I want to, if I edit, these are going to be all of the settings that generate the speeds and feeds. You can get very deep into these. And let's just go to select. Under select, we're going to pick the mill library, and there is 6061. And we'll go ahead and accept for 6061. Stock setup. So this is where things are a little interesting. For the stock setup, it is showing you that this point is at the center of the part. So that kind of shifts things a little bit. If I just go in and say I am 3 inches by 3 inches and 1 inch deep in Z, and we want to display, and it can be a wireframe, and I'm going to go ahead and accept. Notice that the stock boundary is centered about the origin because that's where the other boxes, the other, now let's get back into it, the stock origin was to display. So if I am not selecting corners or the bounding box or one of these graphics items, then I have to put in 1.5, so I'm dividing the 3, and then minus 1.5 to do a coordinate shift so that the stock is centered around my box now. Holding down the middle mouse button and rotating, we're not going to see those steps because I didn't generate a 3D drawing, but when I tell it depths, I am going to be able to verify and see that it's making those cuts. All right, so I go back to Alt-1, get into the top. So basic process you're going to do on every program is if you open up the files, realize that there's not a lot there to change, but tool settings, stock setup, until we get to setting the defaults, you're going to hands-on both of those.
I thought I'd follow along, but that red box didn't happen.
Okay, so the stock setup is probably the most confusing. We'll shift in very quickly.
I didn't click display.
Okay, yeah, so to get it turned on, you're going to display it in wireframe. If you want to see it as a solid, the solid kind of takes over though. So I usually just leave it as the dash wireframe. Okay? All right, so basic processes that you're going to go through. All right, so quick look across selecting operations, selecting all dirty operations. A dirty operation is an operation that had a value, a parameter changed. And when you change that parameter, it hasn't been updated yet. So you will see it with a mark that on the operation, and then we can select all dirty operations. Most of the time, if it's not a 3-axis with a million toolpath lines of code in it, we just go ahead and say regenerate all, or can regenerate all dirty operations and have it pick those. Next one is to backplot, which is to show the toolpath moving in this screen. The backplot verify options, let's see, backplot, and then verify selected operations is going to hand this off to a secondary simulation that's going to pop up on your screen and show you the solid, have the preview, and run the toolpaths for you. And then the verify options, posting, because we're in demo, we're not going to be able to post. When we get our licenses updated to 2017, we'll be able to see this output the G&M code. And then high feed rates, delete all operations in groups. So you probably want to be careful of that one because it means just what it says. It's going to disappear. All right, locking operations. We want to be able, as this gets busier and busier, we put in more toolpaths and we're accumulating lots of little lines on the screen. We want to show and hide those toolpaths. So toggle display on selected operations. Show what we're looking at. When I'm through with it, I'm going to turn it off, and it's still going to be there. It's not like it's on a level or a layer, or the level, but it's going to be manageable. And then the ghost toggle posting on selected operations. If I wanted a what if scenario, let me do a pocket versus a face and see what the toolpaths are. I can leave them until I make a decision. And if one of them is ghosted, is toggled to not post, then it will ignore it in the posting of the code. And then directions, move insert arrows, and our insert arrow is where the new operation will go in at. And so most of the time I drag the arrow around where I want it and I bypass these. And only display selected toolpaths, display associative geometry, rapid retract moves, because we're going to be able to determine some of the things that are going on from the lines on the screen. Set up tools and edit reference positions. Okay. So all of that to get to where we can push a button and watch it go. All right, so if I right click, I have mill toolpaths and face, which is the same as coming up here. My workflow is probably going to stay with right mouse button. All right, because everything is right here where I'm working from. It is going to be one of those. Let's see, those go through, toggle. When I can find all of those on my right mouse button, I'm probably not going to come up here and go cycling through. All right, but for reference, we can go into the face. It's asking for a program or a name. So this was tutorial 1. And go through. Now we get to chaining. All right, so select OK to use default stock. If I wanted to run back and forth across the whole piece, because we're not setting up a fly cutter. We're not setting up a 4 or 5 inch fly cutter to dust the top of this part. We're going to take the 1/2 inch end mill and run back and forth a couple times and clean it up. So if I hit OK and just went right to the green checkbox, it would create the whole part. But we need to pick just the area that I want to face. So we're set up for 3D. Probably stay in the C plane, and then the chain. Well, we didn't break those items out, so I may have bitten off more than I can chew on the very first operation. All right, since this is connected, I'm not going to be able to define this as a separate item. So we'll see what we get. All right, so it got kind of lost and zigzagged around. That's not really the desired result. So I'm going to undo, unselect, and unselect, and we're going to just go ahead and pick the OK. And hopefully I have enough screens showing that we'll get everything on there. So that is going to cut all the way across. My preference would be just to do a portion of it, but since I didn't split it or I didn't draw it that way, we're going to go over the entire face. If we wanted to change over to contour, pocket, facing, I can switch operations as long as we're staying in the same mill. Chain geometry is going to show at 0. This is going to be a little more important as we get into further into and more complicated selections. All right, now we're digging into the list. You're pretty much going to touch each of these items. Even if we're not using them, I'm going to look at them. So we have the tool. I'm going to select a library tool. And we come up with the list, and eventually I will have my own tool library. This is everything, center drills, mills, everything. So we're going to filter. Everything is turned on. So I'm going to switch it to none. All right, when I've turned everything off, I just want to see end mills. And if you want to take it further and tell it to just show you 1/2 inch end mills and carbide 1/2 inch end mills, you can filter it down. I don't usually take the time to do that. I go over to Hit OK. The filter is active, so I lost all of the center drills, everything else that was secondary. And I'm looking for the 1/2 inch flat end mill. So I said 260 something. It's actually 290.
If you shut everything off, why is it showing this?
I shut everything off except I then turned the end mills back on.
Oh, okay.
So rather than go click, 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 we just tell it none, come back to the one that we want. So as I hover over each of those, spherical is a ball end mill, corner radius mill, facing mills, we can go through and select just for those items. Once I set up my tool library and I have the tools that I use most commonly, I'll only have to come back to this occasionally. And then we go ahead and hit OK. Let's see, we are feed rate of 50 at 1,069, a little aggressive. Where did it go? Oops. So did I not select it, or did I, okay, make sure that that's selected. Hit OK. 1/2 inch flat end mill. So I got button happy, jumped over something. And so now we're into those surface feet per minute. If this is a high-speed steel, for aluminum, we're going to just punch in 200. 1528, 1530 looks like a reasonable number. If I have one of the high helix, aggressive aluminum end mills, we'll start at 800 and go up from there. So 6112 and feed per tooth. Well, I don't need all those other decimals, but I would tend to buy 36 for a facing operation. Thou and a half for the facing operation would be pretty decent. Still aggressive. Probably going to scare my setup guy. Well, if I'm the setup guy, I'm going to scare myself. But first time it takes off, we're going to want to be in overrides, making sure that it doesn't get away. All right, and 6112 at 36. Now we'll see what the finish looks like. I'm thinking the finish may be borderline acceptable at that rate. Carbide though, maybe. All right, so the tool name goes in. If I want to put in an additional, I'm really bad about not putting in the comments, but the comments will show up in your program. So this is my facing, and then we have the checkbox or the check mark next to the selection. I don't really have to hit the apply through every time I make a change, but if you make a lot of changes in a certain window, it's a good idea to go ahead and apply them, get them into the mix. Going into the holder, we can go down and select for the holder, but really I'm interested in holders when there are collision potentials. Clamps, 3-axis, 4-axis, 5-axis geometry. Other than that, pretty much going to turn the holder off in the simulation, not worry about it. Cut parameters are set to one way. If we needed a nice finish, a nicer finish, we would load the ball screw in the table one direction. So make a pass, lift up, come back, set down, make a pass. Since the loading is in the one direction, we don't get as much of a visual separation, and it may only be a couple of tenths, but when you reverse direction and the ball screw is loaded in the opposite direction, it is going to have a little variation. And so for this, we'll go zigzag, and it can go back and forth. We're going to see the overlaps, a long overlap, approach distances, exit distances. We can manipulate all those depending on our stock condition, how much we need from here to here, overrunning, how much we need on the side. So a cross overlap will be the side. The along will be how much it runs over at the end. The approach distance at the beginning, and exit distance at the end. Typically, we're going to be at tip comp. Only rarely will we go to the center. It's set to climb initially, so it'll pick up. Auto angle or roughing angle at 0. And the stock to leave on floors, I'll go ahead and set that at 0. So basically, I'm going to control the amount of material that I take off at the control. Or I'm going to take care of it at the control. Even number of passes, I don't know that matters. And 75% step over, that's okay. So we just kind of glanced down through here, and I'm kind of just going back and forth, picking things out. And changed a few things, so apply. No depth cuts. We're just going to go down probably 10 thousandths for cleanup. So no depth cuts, and they're set at 0, but I really don't want those left on. If I'm not using it, I'm going to turn it off so it's not active. And then the linking parameters, 1/4 inch retract, 200 thousandths off of the selected face. I'm going to suggest that we go to absolutes so that you're thinking in terms of absolutes, and when we get to where we can utilize the incremental, we'll take on incremental a little later. So absolute, 1/4 inch above the part, 1 inch is a good safe point, and 0.2 to 0.1, I'm okay with the 0.2. And then stock, top of stock, and depth are both 0 because it's going to come down and take that facing pass. We go out to the control, we subtract 10 thousandths, we subtract 15 thousandths to clean up out of our Z work offset. That's how much material we're going to take, and then I can react to it at the machine. Linking parameters, and then reference points. Filters, the rest of these are going to be advanced. Do we want coolant turned on? Well, do we have coolant? If we have coolant, then on, off, mist, through, or custom options depending on the machine definition control. Anything additional, miscellaneous values. All right, so let me modify my previous statement to say we're going to look at everything to linking parameters. And then if there's something specific to the planes, we'll jump down to planes. If there's something specific to multi-axis, we'll jump down to axis control. Go ahead and hit the OK. It figures out the toolpath. We get a preview. That's my facing operation. It calculates it, gives me the preview. Okay, so I know this is a lot of information. There's a lot of buttons to push. You're going to push a lot of buttons. You're going to make adjustments and see where this parameter over that parameter gives a desired result. We're not going to get this all on the first program. So I know it's overwhelming to look at all that information and try to process it. Getting back into the parameters, then double click and it'll take you back in. Pick to whatever it is that you're looking to make adjustments on. Let's see, the moves between cuts were not nice arcs. One way, one pass, dynamic, nah. Roll cutter around corners, no. Feed rate between cuts. I think there's a, okay, I'm not seeing it. I think it has to do with the step over amount. If it's a percentage, then it makes it round as opposed to feeding off and coming back square. All right, so if I rotate up, we have, and that yellow is not great, but there is a yellow in. It comes out, and if no, not seeing the arrows. So until we run the verify. What I have to go on is from 200 thousandths to feed plane, or from the feed plane to the cutting plane. This little blue line tells me where it's going to start. That perpendicular line is what I have to go on. And then when it gets to the end, wrap it out. So there's all kinds of, there's going to be little interpretations that as we go along, you're going to pick up. Uh-oh. So what did I do? Oh, I undid something I didn't want to undo. So I rotated it back. How did I rotate it back? Well, that's annoying. Oh, I'm still undoing things. All right, so let's get back to the redos. All right, so what did I hit? All right, so redo and redo. Okay, so be careful. I think I hit Alt 8 because I slipped into SolidWorks mode, which was normal too. it is Alt-1 to go to the top view. So I'm going to have to look up what Alt-8 does and then get rid of it because I will hit that again. It's almost certainty. All right. So one facing operation, the end mill, the geometry that was selected, and then the toolpath that generated. The next operation goes in at the arrow. Everybody sufficiently overwhelmed, confused, and almost. All right, like I said, a lot of information to go through one night. All right, so the process is to get started with the facing and the contour and get familiar with a couple of operations, get familiar with the format, and then we expand out from there. All right, said that the little check mark on the folder is the one that is going to be acted upon. I hit the toggle display off. That toolpath disappears but is not gone. I can toggle it back on, toggle it off. Whatever's comfortable to work with. All right. Mention again that I am probably going to stay with the right button. If you prefer the machine, I'm sorry, the toolpaths. So mill comes up, toolpaths come up. You can work from the ribbon bar. It's just habits that I'm not going to break anytime soon. So we go back into the contour mill. So contour is making a pass, and the chain versus a partial chain. When I pick the chain, this is going to go all the way around, and it highlights all the way around, which that yellow isn't showing up great, but it is showing it completely around the part. I'm not sure which direction it is yet, so we're going to go ahead and select. And what I'd like to see is that arrow when I first make the selection. But we get out of it, we go into the operation. The very top one, toolpath type, takes me to where I can see the chain geometry. And I would say just make it a habit, do a reality check, is the direction we're doing climb, and the arrow is showing the correct side to cut. I'm not into the material, I'm outside of the material. All right, if this was a pocket, finish pass for a pocket, I'd want to see it basically reversed. And then if we need to, under the chain manager, then we're going to start making changes or editing the chain. Okay, so the horsepower is in that chain. We go back to the tool. We're still with tool 1. Oh, we changed operations. So from facing to contour, it picked up. So we were at 6112. And instead of 36, I'm going to back it off to 20 because I'm going to bury this tool. Material's real close to size, but I do not want to be full on 36 inches a minute into the part until I'm sure. All right, so first mean value is to back it off to about half, and come up with a number based on actual machining conditions. Holder, not so much. I think I got everything in there. Not so well. Plunge feed rate, yeah, that's kind of a weird plunge feed rate. And rapid retract, so that one grays out. And we're still in the same tool, so nothing really on the holder. Cut parameters. So just like the facing, except now we've got a bunch of other little goodies here to play with. Compensation is going to be computer. We're not on this first pass. I'm not going to be concerned with G41, G42. We're going to run around whatever the size of the end mill, whatever the toolpath, that's what we're going to get. We'll get into taking steps. We'll get into compensation on and on. Our choices are control, wear, reverse, wear, and off. Main thing that we'll be focusing on is computer, wear, and if we use off sends it straight down the chain center line. So 1/4 inch of the material that we want to keep disappears in off. Wear is the one that turns on G41, G42. So let's just say that this being a roughing pass, we don't need to engage our compensation for roughing, and call it rough finish. Contour type is 2D, compensation is left. We verified when we looked at that little arrow that it was left compensation, so I shouldn't have to change it here. Graphically, visually, it makes more sense to me to look at the chain than to think, am I on the left side of the part, tool on the left side of the part, tool on the right side of the part, which way am I going? Did I get the desired result? When I can just go look at that arrow and know that I'm going to get the desired result. So this one's already been set. I'm not going to change it unless something comes up, and then I'll probably end up back at the toolpath type, go into the chain, and change it there. Corner radiuses, no. Stock to leave on walls and floors, no. We're just going to cut to size. Said contour type 2D, but there are additional, so pretty much we're going to stay with the 2D. And I've changed enough now that I want to apply. So all the little check marks, those items get applied to this operation. Depth cuts, no. Lead in, lead out. And so we're on the entity, or on the entry and the exit. And for this, we're going to make it easier and just turn those off. And I don't want to start at the midpoint. So I can turn all of those off because this is a square part. I want to adjust the start and adjust the end and make sure to extend. So at the very bottom here, we're going to, first number is percentage. I always like to type into the percentage and then realize that I really wanted to actually set a length. So 1/2 inch end mill, let's go ahead and give it a 1/2 inch, and that would probably be, the minimum, right? And then to transfer anything that we set on the left over to the right, we'll hit the arrows. No breakthrough, no multi-passes, no tabs, linking parameters. We have a depth of 1 inch. My 1/2 inch end mill has an 1 1/4 length of cut. So the retract, we're going to go back to absolutes. And retract will stay at 1 inch. Feed plane can stay at 0.2. Top of stock is 0. And depth is -1 point. If you want to put the decimal in. Okay, so we're not going to overrun. We're not going to fill in any of those, basically whatever we're cutting is theoretically 1 inch. Go ahead and accept. Have a tool path going around. All right, graphic preview. Turn the display off. All right, the steps get a little more complicated. Oh, that was the one I wanted to see, was on the depth. Also notice that the -1 inch is showing at the stock. Bet you wish I was still showing slides, huh? All right. So our first step is going to be 375. And we're going to work across. Now the choice is, do I drill the holes first and then step? Well, that would require a tool change. So I'm going to stay in my 1 tool, 1/2 inch tool, and step in on this cut line. So with the contour parameters, I should have most of my feeds and speeds carry over. So mill toolpaths, contour. And instead of being a full chain, this is going to be a partial chain. So for the most part, we're going to, at least initially, we're going to go between these two. So chain and partial chain. When I select the first entity, we're seeing that it's going in that direction. That's all I want. This is an open profile. Hit OK. I'm going to go back into the chain geometry. Cut is to the wrong side. So right click, change side. But what that did was now, coming this way, I'm conventional, even though I'm on the right side of or on the correct side of the part. So I'm going to change sides, right click, and instead of changing, I'm going to reverse. Now why didn't that work? Okay, maybe they changed the logic, or I forgot. All right, so combination is I've got the arrows. well, I lost them, but I have the arrows on the correct side. I'm cutting across the face, and I'm on the correct side of the material to remove. Tool carried over from previous 375 deep, depending on what we tell it for multi-passes, because we're going to have to take steps in to remove that material. Nothing on the holder. Cut parameters will stay in the computer. We're not going to leave finish pass. We're just, again, we're getting the contour operations in and seeing these. So my actual process would be to step or ramp this down on the outside, then come back with a finish pass, and then set up a roughing pass to step over, and then come back with a finish pass. Same with the next step. So the finish pass gets the compensation and is what's going to allow us to bring in the tolerances. All right, so no depth cut, lead in. I'm going to stay with the contour, but since we're coming down like right on the part, I'm going to give it a little bit more so it has some room to engage. And then the multi-passes come in, and what this is doing is stepping into the part. So roughing, we have a 3-inch part minus the 1 inch to our wall is 2 inches. If I take that in 375 increments, do I want to? 1/4 inch increments would be easier. I could do 8 1/4 inch increments, and that should come out even. And then I'll bypass the finish for now. Don't want to keep the tool down, but there are times where we'd want to keep the tool at the level that it machined at. All right, so let's go ahead and apply since I'm getting kind of deep in. 1 inch, 0.2, and depth minus 0.375. Worst case, if I forget to put anything in depth, it just goes to 0, which is a lot better than slamming it into the part. I'll go ahead and accept. It steps over, comes back up, makes multiple passes across. So at some point, since I now have 3 operations and a bunch of settings, I should probably save this. Like a long time ago. Alright, so where am I going to put this? My SolidWorks is going under my Dropbox, so that's a good place for it. New folder. Oh, and I guess, well, I guess it's going there. And tutorial 1. Alright, so if you're on the class computers, then save it to your flash drives. Otherwise, we'll need to, I still think that deep freeze is going to reset and you will lose whatever's on there. Turn off the display. And then when we did Mastercam for solids, there was always the issue. So one of the reasons that I wanted to save is that Mastercam solids had this little quirk of deleting all of the operations when we duplicated or copied the file. Since this is basically what I want at a different level with a different chain, I'm going to copy it, come down to the insert and paste it. Go into its parameters, and rather than starting fresh and going back through the whole process, I'm going to use the existing. Toolpath type, chain geometry, we can just delete that one. And we're going to try, I need to go right click again, add chain. Don't know if I mentioned the right clicks, but that would be helpful. Direction, accept. Arrows are going the right way. Hit OK. Then, if everything else is good, lead in, lead out stays. Multi-passes go from 8 to 4. And the linking parameters go to minus 0.75 on the depth. And since this was a copy, there is the X telling me that it is a dirty operation. It was there, it was calculated, but it cannot generate as if I had just produced that operation. So this is where we go back up and say regenerate all dirty operations. And is the display off? Yeah, I guess I turn the display off, so I'll turn the display back on. Feeds across, jumps up, feeds across, jumps up. And then we'll collapse some of these so we have one more room for a little more room for the drill. And we'll finish up on the drill, and then I'll take questions and give you guys a hand going through it. All right, mill toolpaths, drill cycle. We need the location. So let's go back to Alt-1. And then if we are picking the picking on the grid, so I'll do a couple on the grid. If these are in oddball locations, if I'm not snapping to the grid, then we need to go back to the entities. Oh, I didn't turn that one back off. But notice that as I hover, I'm getting the center point of the arc. Just have to wait for it. Wait for it. And accept. So 6-point geometries, just like we did previously, I can go back and verify. It's showing me the direction. And then if we want to sort, there are all kinds of sort options. For 6, I'm not going to worry about it.
What do you sort?
Direction. So do you want it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? All right, you can make this go in a myriad of. All right,
you're. One is number 5.
1. Is it highlighting? Nope. Guess not. Where is the sort state is off? Okay, I think this changed from 9. So we can either drag or. Okay, I'm not seeing the box that I'm used to. We're going to have to come back to it. Sorry. All right, library tool, filter, none. Let's see, search down through here. Drill. All right, so basically I'm just hovering over till I see a tooltip that says drill. Hit OK. And if we wanted to center drill, we would pick the center drill. We're just going to plunge through so that we can get our operations started. 3/8 inch drill. Go ahead and accept. High-speed steel and aluminum, 200. And 0.03 is not too bad. Probably get to 0.5. Seems maybe a little on the high side. And so if it looks like I'm taking my best guess, I am. 20 seems a little fast, 12 seems a little too slow. We have the Goldilocks, 16 is hopefully just right. All right, so drill. And like I said on the comments, I kind of tend to forget. So on the next 2 contours, I could have put step 1, step 2, and that would have just denoted where it was going, what it was going to do. And those would show up in the code to kind of pick up that operation. Set the holder. No. Cut parameters. We're just going to drill straight through. So we do have the list G81, G82, G83, G84, G85, and the G70s are all in there. Absolute. Further retract. We'll stay 1 inch. Now we can go to 0.1 on that. And then stay absolute and minus 1 inch. All right, so if I do minus 1 inch, it does not take into account the tip of the drill. So that 118 or 135 degree drill point, we're going to end up with a nice little angle at the bottom. So that's where tip comp comes in. You can use the calculator. I'm fonder of tip comp than I am the calculator, but if you want to do the depth calculator, It will add the 112 to the depth if you set it, so this will be minus 1.12. Otherwise, we go over to tip comp, and I can see the same number there, but instead of going to 5 decimal places, back it off to 3. That also assumes that at 118 degrees it's just going to break through. We didn't add anything for it to clear the burr, any of that. Oh, and it would help to hit the checkbox and actually turn it on. So once it's active, now I have a value. It's probably going to keep calculating it for me. So breakthrough amount, that was the one I was looking for. 10 to 30 thousandths depending on the material. All right. So selecting everything, turning the display on, that's what you'd be looking through if you did not manage your toolpaths and displays. All right, so we're going to finish up on the backplot and the verify. So one more save. Backplot comes in and is running basic line toolpaths in the current window. And we can set speeds, and so we'll go a little faster. And we're just going to see those blink as it goes through the process. So not a lot of information, but it's quick, it's easy. It gets you kind of in that into the process. We go over to the verify. It's going to launch the external simulator. We have the block. This is the stock that we defined from our initial setup. And let's just go ahead and play. Speed is probably a little on the fast side, so we'll back it down. Facing operation, contour operation, step, multi passes. So not the most efficient, but again, it's to get you in, get you started pushing buttons, and getting a feel for all of those parameters. A lot of them we're not ever going to change, but you're going to look at them. You're going to go through the process of observe and react, and then when it gets out to the machine, what were the conditions it machined under? Was it good? Do you need to make changes? And it's an iterative process you're just going to continually go through and build on.